Do you think that's why sometimes women struggle to make changes because they're concerned about what happens if it doesn't work?
Yeah, I really do. And I think I've had multiple women say to me, which is horrible, they'll say, "Oh, doesn't everyone hate their job? I'll just suck it up until retirement. I'll suck it up until the kids are out of the house." And I just want to say, no, not everyone has to hate their job. So if you feel that way, there's so much psychology behind that, right? Like, are they just saying that as an excuse? Are they not ready to make the pivot? Do they feel like there's too much unknown? Because saying that they're just going to stay stuck because everyone is stuck is not a pleasant thought.
Yeah, really, it almost seems like it's hopeless. And I
Yeah.
guess as a coach, one of your jobs is to ascertain whether or not you can get them from hopeless to helpful in terms of helping themselves, make that change. But the reality is, so much of it depends on one's mindset. Hi, I'm Glennis Woods Mullins, and I love to help women to vibe, to be more vibrant, intuitive, beautiful, and empowered in midlife. So come on, let's vibe. You hear so much about people talking about the second act. What are they going to do after they get to a certain stage in their life? Many times that question is asked during midlife. And our guest today is an expert in the idea of helping women to figure out what their second act is. We have with us today Shannon Russell. She is a life coach and she has a podcast that talks about this very thing, the second act. And also, she just has written a book that's coming out in a couple of weeks that discusses the same topic, the second act, and what women can do to move through that transition in a way that's successful and fulfilling. Thank you, Shannon, for being on the Vibe Lifting podcast. It's wonderful to have you here today.
It's so great to be here. I'm looking forward to this. Thank you.
You're welcome. So tell us a little bit about you and how you came to be so interested in the idea of a second act as a career transition and business coach.
Yes, well, I actually transitioned my own career. I was in television for 16 years in television production in Hollywood and New York City. And then once I began to start my family, I realized I was missing first birthdays and Halloweens and bedtime, and something had to give. So when I had my second little one, I decided to leave television and try to figure out what I could do for my second act.
Yeah, it says here on your bio that you stopped producing shows for other people and started producing your own life. What did that
Yes.
entail? What kinds of things did you begin to do that make that pivot?
Well, I first started looking at, well, first I decided to really celebrate what I had accomplished. I think that's important for all of us is to accept and appreciate what we've done in that first act of our lives. And instead of grieving a change, I celebrated it. I had accomplished my dream since I was a little girl. And then I said, okay, well, what would make me happy and what would my non negotiables be? And that was my two little boys. I wanted to be able to be with them and be present. So I started really having those discussions with myself of what else can I do with this 16 years of experience and what does it look like? And I tried a couple of different things that didn't feel right. And then finally I said, you know what? Entrepreneurship will give me that flexibility I need. And so I ventured in and I bought my first franchise as my first stepping stone into business.
What was the franchise?
It was a Snapology STEM education franchise. So we taught
Mhm.
kids robotics and coding and all of that good stuff. So it was perfect because I had two little boys to take with me and I could build it from home, which was great.
And how did that turn out from you? What did you learn from that experience?
I learned that I could do hard things and that my experience really did transfer. And I think that's the big thing is you think, well, I've done this for so long. What else could I possibly do? And I'm telling you, if a television producer
Mhm.
can find that experience and build a business that's successful, and I did within the first 2 years, I had built up to be probably in the top 3 or 5 of my franchise organization. And so it
Mhm.
showed me that I could do this, have an impact on my community. And I wanted to keep building businesses after that because it just felt so great to be able to see my skills actually transfer into something else.
What are some of the things that you think women should be thinking about when it comes to making that transition and when it comes to making that change into their second act?
Well, what I was getting a lot with that first business is that women would come to me and say, "Oh, you must have been a great teacher. What grade did you teach?" And I'd say, "Oh, no, actually, I was in television." And it would spark that organic conversation where they'd say, "Well, can you help me? I'm not happy anymore. This job doesn't fit like it did when I was 22." And so I think in starting to have those conversations with women and helping them, to coach them, it was really looking at your experience, looking at those non-negotiables, and really starting to research those second act ideas that you might be pondering to say, like, is this something that's truly going to fulfill me? And really trying to put all those pieces together and then say, okay, well, what's that exit strategy look like for me? Because not everyone can just quit and start tomorrow. There might be a roadmap to get you there.
How do you help women develop that roadmap? Because, there are so many things that can come up in the course of trying to make that pivot and change careers. And there's also the non-negotiables. I wonder too, where does that start and where does it end? Because you can have several non-negotiables, but those same non-negotiables could be things that could keep you from being successful in making that transition. So how do you maneuver and negotiate all of that?
Well, I am certified in UMAP, which is a career assessment. So I use that with my clients, and that just pulls out your strengths, your values, your personality, your skills. So you have this roadmap that you can, or this profile that you can really look at when an opportunity comes up. So if you're thinking, oh, I might want to open a Pilates studio, well, you can look at this, UMAP profile and say, how does this really align? Does it align? And is it going to allow me to, if your non negotiables are, be there to pick up the kids from school or not work on weekends, you can kind of see how that aligns and if that's something that you should pursue further. And I've had clients come and say, you know what, I want to do this, that, and this. And then we look and they go, oh, no, I didn't realize it was going to entail X,
Mm.
Y, and Z. And then they can cross it off and go to the next option. So I think it's looking at what those non-negotiables are for you, what you're willing to give up, and then looking at your skills and maybe you're really good at numbers, but maybe you don't want to work in that anymore. So kind of looking at what you want to take with you into your second act and then figure out kind of your way forward from there.
Well, I would imagine that most people want to take some kind of a skills assessment and see how those skills might transfer into something else that they might want to do. What's that process? I know you mentioned the map, but let's say they don't have an idea of what they want to do. They just know they want to do something else. What processes do you take them through to help them identify what that something else might be?
Yeah, well, the UMAP really pulls that out. And so we can look, it'll show you in different categories. Oh, I'm very creative. I'm really good at, marketing and communication, or I'm good at leadership. And here are some things that I really don't want to do. And then you can use that to help you. And really to even look at all of the experience and skills that you've had over your career so far. And a lot of times we'll look at it, even if we just write it all down on paper, and we'll say, oh, it's not that special. Everyone can do these things. But it's because you're so close to it. And when you really take that outside look, you can say, wow, I've really done a lot. And an example is a teacher, because I have a lot of teaching clients and they say, oh, all I can do is really work with kids. But then if you look at it, they know how to speak in front of people and give presentations. They know how to write curriculum. They know how to do admin paperwork. They know how to communicate with parents and faculty. So there's so much they could bring to another business or another career. And then it's just kind of seeing what you like and dislike and drawing those, threads, if you will, connecting those dots. Um,
Yes.
yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was thinking as you were talking about that, so many women begin this process. They're going to make a change, they're going to pivot, they've identified what career they want to pursue, and they're beginning to prepare for that, not just financially, but emotionally and everything else. And then something happens, and their mojo or their desire to make that change goes down. But
Mhm.
you, as a coach, know that this is probably a good fit for them. How do you motivate them to keep going?
Well, it's really looking at different things to say, okay, well, let's see what that scenario, the day to day of that role would look like for you. And once you start looking at it and you research a little bit more, you might get that confidence to say, oh, you know what? That does sound like what I would want my day to look like. And then you dig in a little bit more. Maybe you talk to someone who's already working in that industry and you start thinking, like, okay, well, maybe I can do that. And maybe it's not tomorrow, maybe it's in 6 months, but you work towards it, maybe even start something on the side. But it's a way of you to test it out and you don't feel like you're putting all of your eggs in one basket, right?
Right, exactly. I know you've written a book about this very thing. Tell us a little bit about the book and what it is you think women should learn from getting your book.
Yeah, the book is called Start Your Second Act: How to Change Careers, Launch a Business, and Create Your Best Life. And it's really about my career transition, that of my clients, some celebrities are in there that I've worked with, and really my coaching and my strategies that I work with my own clients about of really appreciating where you've come from, figuring out where you're moving forward to, and then excelling into that. And at the end of each chapter, I have questions and prompts and workbook style resources for people, so I'm hoping it will just be another tool that's more accessible to people that they can grab and kind of take their gems and get some inspiration from.
Well, that sounds exciting. I think that women sometimes, at least the women I've worked with, I'm in a different genre of working with women, and that's wellness. And I think all of my clients have this desire of what it is they would like to do or how they would like their life to be. But one of the biggest challenges is dealing with the stumbling blocks that come along the way because unfortunately it's not a smooth journey, but I always look upon those journeys and those interesting things that happen that sometimes get in the way as wonderful experiences that give them tools later for something else that's coming down the pike that they haven't even anticipated. Has that happened with
Mhm.
you?
Oh, yeah. I mean, when I first left television, I took a 9 to 5 job close to home, thinking that's what I was supposed to do. That was responsible. I
Mhm.
started going for my master's degree in education, thinking that's what I'll do. I'll be a teacher. It'll be stable. Realizing that those were not what I wanted to do and weren't good fits, but they helped me and they led me into the next phase of my life. So, yeah, I think all of those missteps actually are blessings in disguise.
Yes, they are. And I know people don't want to hear that, but they truly are. And what have you learned from your guest stories about changing careers? I know you have a podcast. And what
Yes.
kinds of stories have they shared with you? And what have you learned from them?
That I think we're all capable of so much more than we give ourselves credit for. And I think that, if we give ourselves some grace and you just admit that there's something else in life that you want to try and you just take those little steps towards it, you can come out on the other side. And it could be somewhere that you've never expected to be. And that happened in my circumstance, and definitely for my guests as well, who have made crazy transitions. And you are a guest on my podcast, and it's fantastic to have you as well and telling your story. So, yeah, I think it's just inspiring to hear other people and their missteps and then how they've come through to the other side to find their place.
When I first started my business 18 years ago, things look very different now than how I thought they were going to look. My goal was to open a dance studio for women over 40 because I'm a dancer in my other past life. And I'm certainly certified to teach classical ballet and other kinds of movement. Then I was going to hire other teachers. And so I did that. But I found so much more of a need for women to be well in other ways than just dance. I mean, that was just like the tip of the iceberg. There were women who were suffering from chronic disease, obesity. Some were dealing with empty nest syndrome. So there was some depression. There was a whole lot that was going on. And then all of a sudden I said, wait a minute, what else can I do to help women besides just teaching them dance? And it was from there that I got into the whole wellness genre and all of that. But I find that lots of times when you're just starting out as an entrepreneur and you have this goal in mind of what it is you want to do, how you want to do it, the timeline, business plans, all these things. But at some point, if you're lucky, you're going to have to pivot. And I say if you're lucky because it's in the pivot that you sometimes get some of your key learnings.
Absolutely. And you're right. It's like I grew that franchise for 8 years, and then I said, and in the interim I started my coaching business, and my heart just went to that, and I said, "You know what? I love what I built. I'm going to sell that." And I sold it successfully last year and made profit from it so that I could keep my coaching going because that's where my heart was. And you're right. It's in that pivot of just saying, I'm going to try something else. It's almost like you get that endorphin rush and you want to challenge yourself again. And then you want to bring other people into the fold so that they can experience it with you.
What kinds of things do you talk with women about, that very first assessment in terms of what they should expect along this journey?
I usually ask them how ready they are to make
Mm,
that change. Because oftentimes, people will say, I really want it, but I've got this, that, and the other, or I've got this, or I've got this vacation. There's so many excuses or
mm.
things happening. So it's really, okay, great. Well, let's look at your timeline And let's see what we can do now. Because I often say that if you know you have a 6 month or year leadway, there's a lot you can do to build your business or build something on the side or do your research while you're earning that paycheck. So, yes, you can wait until the day that you're ready financially to make that leap, or you can start now. And starting now just helps you explore it more. You can make those twists and turns and pivots. And then in my opinion, you'll be that much more successful when you're absolutely ready down the road.
Well, that brings me to an excellent question, and this is really important. What are some of the tips to help someone know when they should make that change in work and in their lives?
I really work on the exit strategy piece because I think it's important when you're thinking about making that change that you feel right, especially as a woman, because a lot of times we hold the house. We're doing everything. We're taking care of the kids. We're making sure that everything is as perfect as it can be. And so trying to make a shift for ourselves sometimes feels, I don't like using the word selfish, but a lot of my clients will say it feels that way
Mhm.
and that they don't want to disrupt their family. So we'll look at the financials. We'll look to see how long should they be working until they make that pivot. Are they in a really toxic work environment where they can't stay there much longer? So let's figure out, do you need to find a part-time job while you build your business? Really everything is very personalized, but it's important because you don't want to just make that leap and find yourself miserable in that next role as well. So really
Yeah.
just making sure that you're setting yourself up for success and safety.
Do you think that's why sometimes women struggle to make changes because they're concerned about what happens if it doesn't work?
Yeah, I really do. And I think I've had multiple women say to me, which is horrible, they'll say, "Oh, doesn't everyone hate their job? I'll just suck it up until retirement. I'll suck it up until the kids are out of the house." And I just want to say, no, not everyone has to hate their job. So if you feel that way, there's so much psychology behind that, right? Like, are they just saying that as an excuse? Are they not ready to make the pivot? Do they feel like there's too much unknown? Because saying that they're just going to stay stuck because everyone is stuck is not a pleasant thought.
Yeah, really. It almost seems like it's hopeless. And I guess
Yes.
as a coach, one of your jobs is to ascertain whether or not you can get them from hopeless to helpful in terms of helping themselves, make
Yeah.
that change. But the reality is so much of it depends on one's mindset. That this is something
Mhm.
that I want to do, and I'm going to work through whatever the issues are that come up,
Yeah.
during my coaching experience. It's you have to make up. I know for me, my issue was that regardless of what kinds of things that would come up, I would still keep moving forward and keep accomplishing my goals. And it's so interesting because it's hard to believe that it's been 18 years since I, as they call it, earned a regular corporate paycheck. I left corporate America at the age of 51 because I had developed an anxiety disorder and I knew I needed to do something different. And so
Mm.
I kind of fell back on prior education. I was a nutrition minor, and then I had all this background in dance. So I thought there's got to be something here I could do. And it was right around the time that the mind, body, spirit wellness genre was beginning to take off online. So I was
Mm.
pretty much a pioneer, and I didn't have anyone to fall back on like they do now. There weren't coaches back then in the same way that there is
Right.
now. There wasn't a chat GPT to look information up. There wasn't a whole lot out there. So I had to kind of, do it based, it was my passion that kept
Yeah.
me pushing, and then, I learned from my guests on my podcast, I learned from books, I got some certifications, but it was definitely a journey. And when I look back at it now, it's really all about the journey, not so much about the destination.
Mm. Yeah, you can learn so much about yourself. And I'm so proud of you for all that you've accomplished and how you've pivoted and pivoted to find where you need to be too. It's really inspiring.
Well, I just made up my mind that after 25 years in corporate America, it was just time for a change. And my anxiety disorder wasn't the fault of corporate America totally, but I knew that environment would exacerbate my symptoms. And I
Yeah.
still had four daughters in different phases of schooling, one in college and two more right behind her, and then a little break and then another one. So I said, okay, I got to do something because I don't want to end up quitting or losing my job because I'm not performing at optimum because I'm so miserable. So I think the first thing that I had to do, and the first thing I did do, was to get some help to figure out in terms of just how I was feeling about myself, why I was feeling that way, and what kinds of tools and things that I need to be using to get to that other point. And I think sometimes what women really need, even more so than us talking at them or giving them advice, whatever, they need tools. They need, things that when this happens, try doing this. When this happens, try doing that. Because women are doers. We have problems just being, we're doers. And it really does help to have those tips and those tools. So when it comes to working with women and the things that you do, what kinds of tools do you help them to develop to take them through different parts of their journey?
Well, a lot of times it's the schedule because if you're used to a 9 to 5 job, you have this schedule, but now you're an entrepreneur, you're moving towards that, and it's your own schedule. You're your own boss. So it's coming up with those routines and those protocols and those systems that keep you moving as like the one man band, really. And that's often hard, just getting into that routine and then setting up a system of peers that you can talk to, whether it's online or in person because it can be very lonely. As you and I both know, starting a business, you need to have those other business minded friends that you can talk to and question. And if you have an accountability partner or a consultant or a coach, that's great. But you still want to surround yourself with other business owners. So it's really just kind of forming this new world of yours because I think that's what carries you through all the phases of your business as
Yes,
a
that is very
business.
true. My first 5 years, one of my best friends became someone that I had not met in person until years later.
Oh,
And she
funny.
was another entrepreneur working online because
Mm,
my other friends, although they were supportive and at a girl, they had no idea what they were at a girling about. I mean,
right.
when I
Yeah.
when I published my first online magazine, they kept asking me where could they go to purchase the magazine. I was like, no, it's online. Online? What do you mean? It was this total disconnect. They had never been entrepreneurs. They were used to their 9 to 5 jobs, very successful women, but just in a different niche. And here I was pushing the envelope, doing and talking about things that not only have they not thought about, but they have not even heard of. And it sounded
Mm.
so far-fetched. Okay, so you're going to help women get well, but you're not a doctor, or you're going to do it online. Don't you need to see them? All these different things. And
Yeah.
they were right. Those were some of the things I had to overcome because the demographic that I chose, which was 40 plus, they weren't online like that back then. They really didn't start getting really heavily online until right around COVID, quite frankly. By that time, they were in their 50s. But, now the 40 somethings are in a totally different place. So my business is totally different as a result of, as time went on, people who became 40 were more engaged in social media, being online, conducting business online. That began to change. I've seen the generations come through my business, and it's totally different. Whereas, when I first started, there was even problems with my clientele getting on Zoom. So sometimes you have to think about, okay, this is what I want to do, but who is actually going to be interested in
Mm.
supporting what it is that I do? Who are going to be my clients? And is that realistic and all that? I hadn't asked that question. If I had someone like you helping me back then, the friend that I did meet, though, she was an encourager. And whenever I
Mm.
run across a stumbling block or whenever, things like this is just not going to happen, she was there for my rah rah because she understood what it was that I was trying to do. And that made all the difference.
Yeah. And I'm sure you've watched her business grow too. So together you're growing at
Yes.
and helping each other.
Absolutely. Well, I want everybody to know that if you look on the show page, go ahead and take a look at the Start Your Second Act, How to Change Careers, Launch a Business, and Create Your Best Life. It's one of those books that you want to have in your library to be able to get some tips on what you want to do for your second act. I know because I've gotten your emails and your voicemail messages that all of you are at that stage of life where you're thinking about doing something else, but you're not quite sure what that's going to be. So this book right here could be a possible solution to help gear you in the right space and get you on target. Now, I know you also have coaching as well. And so I've included your website and all your social media so they can all find out more about Shannon. Shannon, thank you so much for being on
Thank
the Vibe
you.
Living podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. This was wonderful.
Oh, you're quite welcome. It's wonderful having you here today. And thank you to all of you who have decided to take some time to hang out with me and Shannon and to talking about that second act, that other stage of life that we're all going through or getting ready to go through. And take a look at the other podcasts as well. There's lots of information that's going to help you be more vibrant, intuitive, beautiful, and empowered in midlife. In other words, help you to vibe. Thank you so much for listening. Have a fantastic day. And don't forget to vibe. Bye bye, everybody. Thanks for listening to the V.I.B.E Living Podcast. And don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment, and share this podcast. Have a fantastic day, and don't forget to vibe. Bye-bye, everybody.